Behind the epic cattle drives and legendary shootouts of Howard Hawks' Western masterpiece lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets, feuding directors, and unexpected Hollywood drama. From a billionaire's petty lawsuit that nearly killed the film to homoerotic undertones that shocked 1940s audiences, this classic harbors more scandals than cattle. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Red River. Fact 1. Extinct cattle stars. When Howard Hawks began filming Red River in 1946, he faced an unexpected challenge that would force him to become creative with one of the most important elements of his Western epic. The Texas Longhorn cattle that were supposed to be the stars of his massive cattle drive had been nearly extinct as a breed for about 50 years when production started. These iconic animals, with their distinctive wide-spreading horns that could span up to 7 feet across, had once roamed the Texas plains by the millions during the height of the cattle drive era in the 1800s. By the time Hawks needed them for his authentic portrayal of the first great cattle drive along the Chisholm Trail, only a few dozen genuine Texas Longhorns were available in the entire country. This presented a serious problem for a director who was determined to create the most realistic Western ever filmed, complete with thousands of cattle moving across the landscape in what would become some of the most spectacular scenes in cinema history. Hawks and his production team solved this dilemma through careful planning and strategic camera work. Most of the massive herd that fills the screen in Red River were actually Hereford cattle and other crossbreeds that were much more readily available. However, the precious few genuine Texas Longhorns were placed prominently in crucial scenes where their distinctive horns and authentic appearance would be most visible to audiences. The cinematographer Russell Harlan worked closely with Hawks to ensure that when viewers saw close-up shots of the cattle or moments that required the most authentic Western atmosphere, the real Longhorns were positioned exactly where they needed to be. This careful orchestration meant that audiences got the visual impact of seeing genuine Texas Longhorns without realizing that most of the herd surrounding them were actually stand-ins. This creative solution allowed Hawks to maintain the historical authenticity he wanted, while still achieving the epic scale that made Red River such a memorable cinematic experience, even though the very animals that had made the original cattle drives possible had nearly vanished from the American landscape. Fact 2. Howard Hughes' revenge lawsuit. Just weeks before Red River was scheduled to premiere in theaters across Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas in August of 1948, billionaire filmmaker Howard Hughes filed a lawsuit that threatened to destroy the film's release entirely. Hughes claimed that the climactic gunfight scene between John Wayne and Montgomery Clift was plagiarized from his own Western film The Outlaw, which had been released in 1943. This legal attack wasn't just about protecting his work, but was rooted in a bitter personal grudge that Hughes had been nursing for years. The conflict between Hughes and Hawks traced back to 1940, when Hawks had been hired to direct The Outlaw but quit the production after clashing with the controlling Hughes over creative differences. Hughes never forgot this perceived betrayal and had been waiting for an opportunity to strike back at the director who had walked away from his project. When he saw the final cut of Red River and noticed similarities in the confrontation scene, Hughes saw his chance for revenge. With Red River's premiere less than a month away, Hughes threatened an injunction that would have delayed the film's release indefinitely, potentially costing the production company millions of dollars. The situation became so dire that investor Edward Small found himself playing referee between what he described as two animated redwood trees, trying to negotiate a solution that would satisfy Hughes' demands while saving the film. Hughes ultimately agreed to edit the sequence himself, making cuts that eliminated approximately 24 seconds of footage from the climactic scene. The most significant loss was John Wayne's menacing dialogue where he growls at Montgomery Clift, saying, "Draw. Go on. Draw. Well then, I'll make you." Hughes also removed a shot where Wayne's bullet grazes Clift's cheek, effectively neutering some of the scene's intensity. The compromise required film editors to fly to the Southwest, where Wayne's movies typically premiered, and physically splice the recut footage into prints that had already been struck and distributed to theaters, all accomplished just in time for the scheduled release date. Fact 3. Clift's first film sat unreleased. Montgomery Clift's entry into Hollywood was marked by a peculiar twist of timing that created lasting confusion about his film career origins. While Red River was actually Clift's very first movie role, filmed in 1946 when he was just 25 years old and fresh from his successful Broadway career, audiences wouldn't see this debut performance until September of 1948 due to the film's prolonged post-production problems and legal delays. During the 2 years that Red River sat unreleased, Clift had moved on to film his second movie, The Search, a drama about displaced children in post-war Europe directed by Fred Zinnemann. The Search was completed much more quickly and efficiently than Red River, allowing it to reach theaters in March of 1948, a full 6 months before Red River finally premiered. This meant that moviegoers first encountered Montgomery Clift as the compassionate American soldier helping war orphans rather than as the tough cowboy standing up to John Wayne on the cattle trail. The timing confusion was further complicated by the fact that The Search earned Clift an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, establishing his reputation as a serious dramatic performer before audiences had even seen the Western that actually launched his screen career. Film historians and entertainment journalists struggled for years to correctly document which movie truly represented Clift's film debut, with many early sources incorrectly listing The Search as his first picture. This mix-up also affected how Clift's career trajectory was perceived by the public and industry professionals, since The Search showcased his method acting approach and emotional vulnerability, while Red River displayed his ability to hold his own against established Western stars like John Wayne. Had Red River been released first, as originally intended, Clift might have been initially typecast as a Western actor, rather than being recognized primarily for his intense dramatic performances. The delayed release of Red River meant that Clift's first impression on movie audiences was completely different from what Howard Hawks had originally planned when he cast the young stage actor in his ambitious Western epic. Fact 4. John Ford's shock at Wayne. When legendary director John Ford watched Red River for the first time, he was so stunned by John Wayne's performance that he blurted out one of Hollywood's most famous behind-the-scenes quotes. Ford, who had been working with Wayne since rescuing his career with Stagecoach in 1939, reportedly exclaimed, "I didn't know the big son of a bitch could act." This reaction was particularly significant because Ford and Howard Hawks were considered rivals in the Western genre, and Ford's admission revealed just how much Wayne had grown as an actor under Hawks' direction. Up until Red River, Wayne had primarily been seen as a reliable action star who could deliver his lines convincingly and handle the physical demands of Western roles. But he hadn't been challenged to explore the darker, more psychologically complex aspects of character development. In Red River, Wayne played Thomas Dunson as a man who gradually transforms from a determined pioneer into a tyrannical, almost villainous figure consumed by his own obsessive drive to complete the cattle drive at any cost. Ford's surprise at Wayne's acting ability wasn't meant as an insult to his longtime collaborator, but rather reflected the industry's general perception that Wayne was more of a movie star than a serious actor. The role of Dunson required Wayne to show vulnerability, cruelty, and internal conflict in ways that his previous roles had never demanded, and Hawks had encouraged him to dig deeper into the character's psychological complexity. Ford's newfound respect for Wayne's acting abilities directly influenced his future casting decisions, leading him to offer Wayne more challenging and dramatically demanding roles. This shift became evident in later Ford films like The Searchers in 1956, where Wayne played the morally ambiguous Ethan Edwards, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962, where his character grapples with the changing nature of the American West. Ford's reaction to Red River essentially marked the beginning of Wayne being taken seriously as a dramatic actor, rather than just an action hero. Fact 5. The gun. Stroking scene scandal. One of Red River's most talked-about scenes features what has become known as one of Hollywood's most notorious moments of coded homoeroticism, involving Montgomery Clift and John Ireland in a sequence that was shocking for 1948 audiences. In the scene, Ireland's character Cherry Valance asks to examine Clift's revolver, leading to an extended moment where both men handle and admire each other's weapons with an intensity that goes far beyond typical gunslinger bravado. During this encounter, Ireland's character delivers the memorable line, "There are only two things more beautiful than a good gun, a Swiss watch or a woman from anywhere," before pointedly asking Clift's character if he's ever had a good Swiss watch, clearly implying that he's never been with a woman. The two men then proceed to demonstrate their shooting skills in what appears to be an elaborate mating ritual, each trying to impress the other with their marksmanship abilities. What made this scene particularly scandalous were the persistent rumors about the real-life relationship between Montgomery Clift and John Ireland during the filming of Red River. Hollywood insiders whispered that the two actors were having an affair, and many interpreted the gun-handling sequence as a deliberate reference to their rumored romantic involvement. The scene's homoerotic undertones were so obvious that film scholars and critics have cited it for decades as an example of how Hollywood movies of the era included coded gay content that could slip past censors while still being understood by knowing audiences. The moment became even more significant when viewed in the context of Clift's personal life, as he was indeed gay in an era when homosexuality had to be carefully hidden in Hollywood. Ireland's intense gazing at Clift throughout their scenes together, combined with the intimate way they handle each other's weapons, created a subtext that was unusually bold for its time, making this sequence one of the most analyzed moments in Western film history. Fact 6. Ireland's part mysteriously vanished. John Ireland's role as the gunslinger Cherry Valance was originally written to be much more substantial in Red River, but by the time the film reached theaters, his part had been drastically reduced in what remains one of Hollywood's most mysterious editing decisions. The character was initially conceived as a major player in the story, with a carefully constructed rivalry between Valance and Montgomery Clift's Matt Garth that was supposed to build toward an inevitable showdown that never materializes in the final cut. Two conflicting explanations have emerged for why Ireland's role was so severely diminished during the lengthy editing process. The official story, supported by director Howard Hawks himself, was that Ireland's alcoholism and unprofessional behavior on set had become so disruptive that Hawks felt compelled to minimize his presence in the finished film. According to this version, Ireland's drinking problems interfered with his ability to deliver consistent performances and created tension among the cast and crew. However, writer Borden Chase and other people involved with the production offered a very different explanation that painted Hawks in a less flattering light. According to Chase, the real reason for Ireland's reduced role was that Hawks had become romantically interested in actress Joanne Drew, who played the female lead Tess Millay, but found himself losing out to Ireland in competing for her affections. Ireland and Drew were indeed having an affair during filming and later married in real life, which would have been particularly galling for Hawks if he had been pursuing her himself. The truth behind Ireland's disappearing act may never be fully known, but the impact on the film is clear to anyone watching Red River today. The careful setup of tension between Ireland and Clift's characters leads nowhere, creating a narrative gap that suggests significant scenes were removed. Ireland's Cherry Valance simply fades from importance in the second half of the film, leaving viewers wondering what happened to what seemed like a crucial character relationship. Fact 7. 150. Tent City in Arizona. When Howard Hawks decided to film Red River on location in the remote Arizona desert, he faced the challenge of housing and feeding hundreds of cast and crew members in an area that had virtually no infrastructure to support a major film production. His solution was to construct what amounted to an entire temporary town in the community of Elgin, southeast of the Empire Ranch, at the staggering cost of $150,000, which was an enormous sum for 1946. This elaborate film camp consisted of 75 semi-portable tent cabins that served as living quarters for the cast and crew, along with mess halls where everyone could eat their meals together, recreational facilities to keep people entertained during their downtime, and all the other equipment and housing necessary to support a major Hollywood production in the middle of nowhere. The entire complex was designed to accommodate approximately 250 actors, technicians, and directorial staff who would be living and working in this temporary community for what Hawks initially projected would be an 8-week shooting schedule. The scope of this undertaking was remarkable even by Hollywood standards, as most film productions either stayed close to established studio facilities or made do with much more basic accommodations when filming on location. Hawks' decision to build what was essentially a small city demonstrated his commitment to creating the most authentic Western possible, since the remote Arizona location provided the vast landscapes and varied terrain he needed for his epic cattle drive sequences. The local Elgin Community Club was repurposed to serve as Hawks' private screening room, where he and his film editor would view the daily rushes to monitor the progress of filming. This arrangement allowed Hawks to maintain the same level of quality control he would have had back in Hollywood, despite being hundreds of miles from the nearest major city. The investment in this temporary infrastructure reflected Hawks' determination to spare no expense in creating his vision of the American West. Fact 8. 5 dams for one river scene. Howard Hawks' determination to achieve absolute realism in Red River led him to undertake one of the most ambitious engineering projects ever attempted for a single movie scene. When it came time to film the crucial cattle crossing sequence along the San Pedro River near Fairbank, Arizona, Hawks discovered that the natural water flow was insufficient to create the dramatic effect he envisioned for thousands of cattle splashing through the river. Rather than compromise his vision or rely on special effects, Hawks ordered his construction crew to build 5 separate dams upstream from the planned crossing point. These dams were strategically positioned to capture and control the river's flow, allowing the production team to release water on command and create the rushing current that Hawks believed was essential for authenticity. The engineering project required significant time and resources, as each dam had to be constructed to withstand the pressure of backed-up water while being capable of releasing it quickly when needed for filming. The complexity of this undertaking becomes even more remarkable when considering that this elaborate water management system was created solely to ensure that one sequence in the film would look exactly as Hawks imagined it should. The director could have easily filmed the scene with the river's natural flow, or used camera angles that minimized the importance of the water depth, but his obsession with creating the most realistic Western ever made drove him to extreme measures. When the cameras finally rolled, the coordinated release of water from all 5 dams created the powerful current that Hawks wanted, allowing several thousand head of cattle to cross through water that looked appropriately challenging and dangerous. The resulting footage became one of the most memorable sequences in Red River, with the churning water and struggling cattle creating a sense of genuine peril that would have been impossible to achieve with the river's normal modest flow. This massive effort for a single scene perfectly exemplified Hawks's willingness to spare no expense in pursuit of his artistic vision. Fact 9. Commemorative silver belt buckles. To commemorate the completion of Red River and honor the key people who helped bring his Western epic to life, Howard Hawks commissioned a series of custom-made solid silver belt buckles that would become some of the most coveted pieces of Hollywood memorabilia ever created. These weren't simple gifts, but elaborate works of craftsmanship featuring a twisted silver wire rope edge, the distinctive Red River D cattle brand prominently displayed in gold in the center, and the words Red River inscribed in gold wire in the upper left and lower right corners. Each buckle was personalized with the recipient's initials engraved in the lower left corner and the date 1946 cut in gold numerals in the upper right corner, marking the year the film was actually shot rather than when it was released. Hawks distributed full-sized men's buckles to the most important members of the production, including John Wayne, Montgomery Clift, Walter Brennan, John Ireland, Assistant Director Arthur Rawson, cinematographer Russell Harlan, and Hawks' own son David. The women involved in the production, including Joanne Drew and Hawks' daughter Barbara, received smaller ladies' versions of the same design. John Wayne treasured his Red River buckle so much that he wore it in many of his subsequent films, including Hawks' later Western Rio Bravo, turning the prop into a recurring element of his screen persona. The buckles became legendary among film collectors and Western memorabilia enthusiasts, representing not just a piece of movie history but a symbol of the camaraderie and craftsmanship that went into creating one of the greatest Westerns ever made. The true value of these commemorative pieces became apparent in 2014 when Montgomery Clift's original Red River buckle was put up for auction. Collectors and film enthusiasts bid aggressively for this piece of Hollywood history, with the final sale price reaching nearly $14,000, demonstrating how these simple gifts from a grateful director had become priceless artifacts representing the golden age of Western filmmaking. Fact 10. The stampede that injured everyone. The spectacular cattle stampede sequence in Red River, which remains one of the most thrilling and terrifying scenes ever captured on film, came at an enormous cost in terms of both human and animal casualties that would be unthinkable by today's safety standards. This single sequence required 13 days of intensive filming with 35 experienced cattle wranglers working to control and direct thousands of panicked animals across the Arizona landscape, creating a level of chaos and danger that pushed everyone involved to their physical limits. The sheer scale of the stampede meant that injuries were almost inevitable, despite the presence of skilled professionals who understood how to work with large herds of cattle. By the time filming wrapped on this sequence, 7 men had been hurt badly enough to require medical attention, with injuries ranging from broken bones sustained when riders were thrown from their horses to cuts and bruises from being trampled or struck by panicked animals. The toll on the animals themselves was even more severe, with 13 horses and mules suffering injuries that left them permanently crippled and unable to work again. The most tragic casualty was a single steer that died during the filming. while an additional 69 cattle sustained various injuries ranging from minor cuts to more serious wounds that required veterinary treatment. These numbers, documented in film historian Todd McCarthy's detailed account of the production, reveal the brutal reality behind what audiences see as an exciting action sequence lasting only a few minutes on screen. Second Unit Director Arthur Rawson, who was given primary responsibility for filming the stampede, worked tirelessly to capture the raw power and genuine terror of thousands of cattle thundering across the desert landscape. The resulting footage justified the enormous risks and costs involved, creating a sequence so visceral and authentic that it has influenced countless Western films in the decades since Red River's release, though few directors have attempted anything quite so dangerous or ambitious. Fact 11. 2 years of editing hell. After Howard Hawks completed filming Red River in 1946, he expected the post-production process to proceed smoothly and have the film ready for release within a reasonable time frame. Instead, he found himself trapped in what became one of Hollywood's most notorious editing nightmares that would stretch on for nearly 2 years and threatened to destroy his ambitious Western epic before audiences ever had a chance to see it. The trouble began when Hawks reviewed the initial cuts of the film and realized that the editors had failed to capture the epic scope and emotional complexity he had envisioned during the grueling months of filming in Arizona. The massive amount of footage, which included countless hours of cattle drive sequences, character development scenes, and action sequences, proved to be an overwhelming challenge for the original editing team, who struggled to find the right rhythm and pacing for such an ambitious story. Desperate to save his film from disaster, Hawks reached out to Christian Nyby, a respected editor who had previously worked on Hawks' films To Have and Have Not and The Big Sleep. The problem was that Nyby was already contracted to Warner Brothers and was busy editing the war film Fighter Squadron, making him unavailable for the extensive work that Red River required. Hawks solved this dilemma by personally contacting Warner Brothers chief Jack Warner, who was aboard the ocean liner Queen Mary traveling to Europe at the time, and somehow convinced him to allow Nyby to work on Red River during his off hours. This arrangement meant that Nyby would spend his days editing Fighter Squadron at Warner Brothers, then work through the nights reassembling Red River into a coherent narrative. The editing process became so complex and time-consuming that multiple versions of the film were created, including a 133-minute pre-release version, with book-style transitions, and a shorter 127-minute theatrical version that replaced the written text with narration by Walter Brennan. Fact 12. Father-son acting duo's only film. Red River holds the unique distinction of being the only film in which legendary Western actor Harry Carey Sr. and his son Harry Carey Jr. appeared together, marking a poignant moment in Hollywood history that connected 2 generations of cowboy stars. Harry Carey Sr. had been one of the biggest names in silent Western films and early talkies, working frequently with director John Ford and helping to establish many of the conventions that would define the Western genre for decades to come. By the time Red River was being filmed in 1946, the elder Carey was nearing the end of his career and would die just a year later in 1947, making this collaboration with his son even more significant as a final professional moment they could share. Harry Carey Sr. played the role of Mr. Melville, a character who appears in the film's early sequences, while his son Harry Carey Jr. took on the much more prominent role of Dan Latimer, one of the young cowboys who joins the cattle drive. The tragic irony of their only screen appearance together is that father and son never actually share any scenes in the finished film, despite both being part of the same production. Their characters exist in different parts of the story, meaning that while both Careys contributed to Red River, audiences never get to see the real-life father and son acting together on screen. Adding another layer of complexity to Harry Carey Jr.'s involvement in the film, there are reports that he actually played 2 different characters in Red River. According to film historians, after his character Dan Latimer is killed during the cattle stampede sequence, Carey Jr. appears later in the movie wearing different clothes and playing what seems to be an entirely different cowboy. In one scene, he stands alongside John Wayne, wearing a black vest and hat, and delivers the line, "They crossed here," suggesting that Hawks either recast him in a new role or that continuity errors resulted in the same actor appearing as 2 separate characters. Fact 13. Wayne wore the buckle forever. John Wayne's attachment to his commemorative Red River belt buckle went far beyond simple sentimentality, transforming a thoughtful gift from Howard Hawks into a permanent part of Wayne's screen persona that would follow him throughout the rest of his legendary career. The solid silver buckle with its distinctive Red River D brand became so important to Wayne that he made it a regular part of his costume in many subsequent Western films, turning what had been a personal memento into an unofficial trademark that connected his later roles back to his breakthrough performance as Thomas Dunson. The most notable appearance of Wayne's Red River buckle came 11 years later when he reunited with Howard Hawks for the Western Rio Bravo in 1959. In that film, Wayne prominently wore his Red River buckle as Sheriff John T. Chance, creating a subtle visual link between the two movies that only the most observant fans would notice. This wasn't an accident or oversight by the costume department, but a deliberate choice by Wayne to honor the film that had established him as a serious dramatic actor and deepened his professional relationship with Hawks. Red River's influence on Wayne's career extended all the way to his final film role in The Shootist, released in 1976, nearly 3 decades after Red River premiered. The makers of The Shootist chose to incorporate actual footage from Red River into the opening montage that established the backstory of Wayne's aging gunfighter character, J.B. Brooks. These clips helped illustrate the character's long and violent past, using scenes of Wayne as the younger Thomas Dunson to represent the fictional gunfighter's earlier exploits. This decision to include Red River footage in The Shootist created a powerful sense of continuity across Wayne's entire career, allowing audiences to see the progression from his complex performance as the tyrannical cattle rancher to his final role as a dying gunman facing his mortality. The use of Red River clips made Wayne's final film into a kind of career retrospective, honoring the movie that had proven his dramatic abilities. Fact 14. Budget explosion bankrupted Hawks. What should have been Howard Hawks' most profitable venture as an independent filmmaker instead became a financial disaster that left the legendary director drowning in debt despite creating one of the most successful Western films of all time. Red River began with an original budget of $1,800,000, which was already considered substantial for 1946, but Hawks' relentless pursuit of perfection and a series of uncontrollable circumstances would cause costs to spiral completely out of control. The budget explosion stemmed from multiple factors, beginning with Hawks' notoriously slow pace of filmmaking and his inability to finish any picture on schedule, habits that became catastrophically expensive when combined with the logistical challenges of filming in remote Arizona locations. Weather delays proved to be one of the most costly problems, as the production endured 6 continuous weeks of unexpected rain that forced the cast and crew to wait in their expensive temporary accommodations while accomplishing virtually no filming. Hawks' perfectionist tendencies made the situation even worse, as he insisted on multiple takes of complex sequences and refused to compromise his artistic vision regardless of the mounting costs. The elaborate cattle drive sequences required enormous coordination between hundreds of people and thousands of animals, and any reshoot or delay meant paying for the entire massive operation to start over again. By the time filming wrapped, the budget had skyrocketed to over $4 million, more than doubling the original estimate. The cruel irony of this financial catastrophe was that Red River became an enormous commercial success, eventually earning over $9 million at the box office and establishing itself as one of the highest-grossing films of 1948. However, Hawks had financed much of the production through his independent company Monterey Productions, along with his partner Charles Feldman, meaning that the cost overruns came directly out of their own pockets. Despite having created a genuine masterpiece that would influence Western filmmaking for decades, Hawks found himself shut out of most of the profits from his own movie. Fact 15. The Last Picture Show connection. Red River achieved a form of cinematic immortality in 1971 when director Peter Bogdanovich chose it as the final film to be shown in the doomed small-town movie theater featured in his acclaimed drama The Last Picture Show. This selection was far from random, as Bogdanovich was not only a passionate film historian who deeply understood the significance of Hawks' Western masterpiece, but also a personal friend and admirer of Howard Hawks himself. When Bogdanovich needed to select the perfect movie to represent the end of an era in American cinema, he deliberately chose Red River because it embodied everything that classic Hollywood filmmaking represented at its finest. The specific scene that appears in The Last Picture Show is the moment when John Wayne's Thomas Dunson tells Montgomery Clift's Matt Garth, "Take him to Missouri, Matt!" followed by Hawks' famous montage of weathered cowboy faces in close-up, cheering and waving their hats in celebration as they cry out in exhilaration. Bogdanovich later explained that he selected this particular sequence because it captured what he considered the most quintessentially Western moment ever filmed, representing the pure joy and freedom of being on horseback under the big sky, with a job to do and a paycheck waiting at the end of the trail. The scene perfectly symbolized the kind of larger-than-life movie-making that was disappearing from Hollywood. As the studio system collapsed and smaller, more personal films like The Last Picture Show became the new standard. The choice to feature Red River as The Last Picture Show also created a poignant connection between two different generations of American filmmaking, with Bogdanovich's intimate black-and-white character study serving as both a tribute to and a farewell to the epic Western adventures that had dominated movie screens for decades. By using Red River to represent the end of the golden age of cinema, Bogdanovich ensured that Hawke's masterpiece